It all began with something as simple as a fence. Yes, a fence. A boundary meant to separate my yard from the world, to create a little peace, a little privacy. But what I didn't know was that this ordinary project would ignite a firestorm that turned my quiet neighborhood upside down. Imagine this, a sunny Saturday morning, the smell of fresh paint in the air, the satisfying sound of a hammer striking nails, and me, completely unaware that my small home improvement would soon spiral into a full-blown HOA nightmare. I had spent weeks planning the perfect fence. Not too tall, not too flashy, just sturdy wood panels, painted a soft, earthy brown to match the house. I followed every guideline I could find, double-checked my property lines, and even got advice from a local contractor. Everything was by the book, or so I thought. By mid-morning, the fence was half up. I was stepping back, admiring my work, when I heard the unmistakable sound of sirens. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But then, a police car slowly rolled into the street outside my home. My heart sank. Why were the authorities here? Had there been some kind of accident? To my utter disbelief, the officer didn't even knock. Instead, he asked if I was aware that someone in my neighborhood had called emergency services over my fence. My mind went blank. Called emergency services? For a fence? I asked, half laughing, half terrified. Turns out, a neighbor, let's just say the type you've heard about in every HOA horror story, was on the phone with the local authorities, insisting that my fence was in immediate danger. The claims were absurd. It's a hazard, they said. It could cause injury. I looked at the fence, sturdy and newly installed, and could hardly contain my disbelief. Hazard? Really? The officer was polite but firm, leaving me with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. Meanwhile, word of the complaint spread quickly through the neighborhood. By the time I checked my email, a formal letter from the HOA was waiting. Threats of fines, citations, and even a potential lawsuit loomed over me like storm clouds. Suddenly, my simple home improvement project had turned into a legal battlefield. And just like that, my weekend of pride and productivity became a tense standoff with the very people meant to maintain harmony in the community. The question I kept asking myself, how did painting a fence turn into a fight that could cost thousands? Or worse, my peace of mind? This was only the beginning. What came next would test my patience, my resolve, and my understanding of HOA power. The days following the fence incident felt surreal. Every glance out my window felt like surveillance. Every footstep on the sidewalk seemed amplified, and every email ping carried a potential threat. It was as if my peaceful home had transformed into a battleground. My simple fence project had awakened a beast. I never expected a neighbor turned adversary, empowered by the very HOA that was supposed to protect the community. At first, I tried to reason. I emailed the HOA board politely, attaching photos, property surveys, and even the contractor's notes confirming everything was compliant. I wanted dialogue, resolution, some acknowledgement that the complaint was overblown. But what I received back was anything but reasonable. A formal warning that my fence violated aesthetic guidelines and that immediate corrective measures were expected. No discussion, no explanation, just a thinly veiled threat. The tension in the neighborhood grew palpable. Friends who had lived here for years began whispering about past conflicts, stories of homeowners penalized for the smallest infraction. I realized then that this wasn't just about my fence. It was about control. My neighbor had leverage, and the HOA was happy to wield it. One evening, I decided to confront the neighbor directly, hoping for a civil conversation. I knocked on the door, trying to keep my voice calm, measured, friendly. What I found instead was hostility, a barrage of accusations, exaggerated claims about safety, hazards, and thinly veiled threats of litigation. The conversation ended with a warning. You better remove that fence, or you'll regret it. I stepped back, stunned. I had expected tension, maybe a complaint, but not this level of aggression. Back at home, the legal letters started arriving. HOA regulations, citations, references to local ordinances, it was overwhelming. The language was designed to intimidate, to make me question my own right to property. And for the first time, I began to feel the creeping anxiety that comes from realizing your home, a place of safety, can be weaponized against you. I started documenting everything: emails, letters, photographs of the fence, timestamps of conversations, even videos showing the property boundaries. It was meticulous, tedious, and exhausting. But I knew I had to prepare in case this escalated further. By the end of that week, the HOA's tone shifted from bureaucratic to threatening. They hinted at fines, lawsuits, and even escalating to local courts if the issue wasn't resolved immediately. The fence that I had, built with pride, now seemed to symbolize defiance, and it had drawn the line between neighborly civility and outright conflict. Little did I know, the coming days would push boundaries I didn't think could be tested. The fight wasn't just about wood and nails anymore. It was about power, rights, and standing your ground in a community that claimed to enforce rules but often exploited them. The notice arrived on a crisp Monday morning, an official hearing scheduled with the HOA board. My stomach sank as I read it. This was no longer a simple complaint or a neighborly dispute. It was a formalized confrontation, complete with rules, procedures, and consequences. I felt like I was being summoned to a courtroom rather than a community meeting. I spent the next few days preparing. I organized every document, emails, photos, contractor notes, property surveys, even video footage of the fence installation. I rehearsed what I would say, anticipating objections, imagining the most aggressive arguments the HOA could make. But no amount of preparation could erase the nervous knot in my chest. I had never faced anything like this, and yet I knew I had to defend my rights, my home, and my sanity. When the day arrived, the HOA's meeting room felt sterile, intimidating. Board members sat in a semicircle, expressions neutral but unreadable. I stepped up, heart pounding, ready to speak. The first words from the HOA attorney were sharp. "You have violated community guidelines. Your fence is non-compliant, and you are putting your property and the neighborhood at risk." It was like a verbal punch to the gut. I calmly presented my evidence. The surveys proving the fence was within boundaries, the contractor's notes confirming compliance, and the photos showing the finished work. I explained my intentions, emphasizing safety, aesthetics, and respect for the neighborhood. But the board seemed unmoved, taking notes, exchanging glances, and occasionally whispering to one another. Then the neighbor spoke. Every word dripped with accusation and exaggeration, describing my fence as a blight, a danger, and a community hazard. Their tone was sharp, rehearsed, almost theatrical. I felt the weight of the room shift against me. It was no longer a discussion. It was a performance, and I was in the hot seat. Hours passed. Rules were cited, bylaws referenced, and procedures repeated. My arguments were met with skepticism, and every small point I made seemed to provoke further scrutiny. It was exhausting, frustrating, and deeply unnerving. But through it all, I held my ground. I spoke clearly, presented facts, and refused to be intimidated. By the end of the hearing, no immediate resolution was given. The board would deliberate and issue a formal ruling later. Walking out of the room, I felt a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. The stakes were higher than ever, and it was clear this fight was far from over. My fence had become more than wood and nails. It was a symbol of standing up for oneself, against unreasonable authority. The next chapter would reveal the HOA's ruling, and the shocking actions they took afterward. The days after the hearing were tense. Every knock on the door, every notification on my phone, felt like the prelude to disaster. I knew the HOA's ruling could swing either way. A minor reprimand, a hefty fine, or even legal action. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, but I reminded myself that I had done everything by the book. My fence was compliant, my evidence thorough, and my resolve unshakable. Finally, the official letter arrived. My hands shook as I tore it open. The HOA's decision was complicated. They acknowledged that my fence did meet the community guidelines, citing the surveys and contractor notes I had provided. However, they also emphasized the neighbors' complaints and issued a stern warning. Any further disruptions could trigger fines or legal action. It was a mix of victory and caution, a reminder that even when you follow the rules, some battles are more about power than right or wrong. Relief washed over me, but the tension didn't fully lift. I realized that this ordeal had been about more than a fence. It was about asserting my rights, standing up to intimidation, and navigating a system designed to favor the loudest voices. I took a moment to reflect on how quickly a peaceful community could turn into a place of stress and suspicion, where one neighbor's personal grievances could escalate into a legal threat. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Some neighbors approached me with quiet sympathy, sharing their own stories of HOA conflicts and silent struggles. Others avoided eye contact, perhaps wary of being drawn into the drama. And the neighbor who had called emergency services? Their hostility seemed to simmer down, perhaps realizing that their attempts to control the situation had been less effective than anticipated. Through it all, I learned a vital lesson. Knowledge is power. Document everything. Understand your rights. Stay calm in the face of intimidation. And most importantly, never let fear dictate your actions. A simple home improvement project had become a test of courage, patience, and resilience. I had stood my ground, navigated the bureaucracy, and emerged with both my fence and my dignity intact. As I stepped back to admire the finished fence, sunlight glinting off the freshly painted panels. I felt a quiet sense of victory. It was more than wood and nails. It was a testament to standing firm in the face of unreasonable authority. So, if you ever find yourself up against a neighbor, an HOA, or anyone trying to control your home or your choices, remember, preparation, patience, and persistence can turn even the most daunting conflict into a story of triumph. And that's how a simple fence turned into the battle of a lifetime, and how I came out stronger on the other side. Did you enjoy seeing me stand up to the HOA and Karen? If you did, smash that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a crazy neighbor? And don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable real-life HOA stories you won't believe actually happened.